Welcome back to another episode of Open Floor. Filling in for your host, Michael the Pod Pina. I'm Rohan Nadkarni, and I'm joined today by my good friend, my old friend, my fellow Northwestern Wildcat, Jeremy Wu. Jeremy, how's it going, buddy?
What's up, man? Can't complain. Glad to give you a safe space here to talk about how much you hate Boston.
That's right. Yeah, we can get off all our Tatum and Brown takes. Jaylen Brown is who they want Max Strus to be, or no, Max Strus is who they want Jaylen Brown to be. That was the take. So I feel like our listeners would have no way of knowing this. Jeremy and I actually graduated the same year at college. We've known each other for, I guess theoretically, this will be like 11 years since we both got to campus, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, I guess.
Jeremy,
that is true.
What do you most remember about me from college?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I feel like I would walk into the office of the Daily Northwestern and you'd just be like sitting in there.
That's true.
And then also the time that you didn't recognize me on the street.
That can't be right. There's no way I couldn't recognize you on the street.
There was one time. It was awkward.
The reason I find that hard to believe is because what I remember about Jeremy from college is every time I would see him, he had a different hairstyle, and I was really jealous. And your hair to this day remains.
I actually think that's why you didn't recognize me.
That checks out. All right, well, Jeremy, there's a lot I want to get to on the show with you today. We're going to talk some draft stuff. We're going to talk some Lakers. We're going to try to get to a couple emails, which, of course, brings me to my next point. Please keep those emails coming in. We really appreciate every email, text, DM, etc. You guys know the email address. It's openfloormail@gmail.com. If you have not picked up Brother Herring's book yet, please pick up Chris Herring's book, Blood in the Garden, The Flagrant History of the 1990s Knicks. I'm refreshing the Open Floor feed yesterday, and all of a sudden I find out Herring's done a podcast with Spike Lee, and I'm like, I have to follow Spike Lee. So if you haven't checked out that episode, check out that episode. If you're missing Michael, I don't blame you. Feel free to check out the story he has on SI.com today. Or I guess it went up yesterday. He says the Mavs are now a sneaky contender in the West. They had a pretty thrilling game against the Suns last night. Woo! There's so much I want to get to with you in terms of the draft, some stuff about the rookies. But first, I wanted to start with the Lakers. Mike and I talked about LeBron a little bit on the pod earlier this week. The situation just continues to spiral. The Athletic reported, obviously, that Frank Vogel coaching on a game-to-game basis. Things really came to a head. They lost to the Pacers earlier this week. Russell Westbrook finally benched down the stretch of the fourth quarter. Frank Vogel saying after the game, I played the players who I thought were going to win the game. We did a roundtable, myself, Howard Beck, Mannix, Pina, Robin Lundberg, that you guys can check out on SI.com, that we did earlier this week. Woo, I'll pose the question to you, though. Do you think this Lakers thing is fixable at all? Like, is there a realistic way for them to fix it this season?
This season, I mean, look, I think this is the risk that you run, just in terms of team construction. And we've seen this, with LeBron in the past where, he wants to play with two other stars and they make it happen because he wants it to happen. But then again, you lose one, in this case, Anthony Davis, it throws out of whack the whole depth of the team. Right. And then not only do you lose one, but then the other one is not playing well, which, with Westbrook, it's like, well, then what are you supposed to do? Right. And it's a bummer just because obviously it seems like they might waste a really, really, really good LeBron season. I don't want to say it's a waste because just watching him play is still great, but obviously there's not a lot of joy in what the Lakers are doing right now. They're just trying to fit different size pegs into the same size holes, and it's not really working. And I just think, this year, just because of the, salary situation, I don't know what the fix is, right? I mean, traditionally it's been, we have three stars. We're kind of capped out, but we're going to make some moves around the margins. We'll give up some picks or we'll, go sign a vet who wants to chase a ring, right? But this year, yeah, you can do that. But Lakers don't have picks; they cash those out, right? So they don't really have a lot of flexibility. So I don't know, who it is that's going to come in and magically, transform their team. So it's going to have to come from within, and it's going to depend on if Davis, how he comes back, when he comes back, and then if Westbrook can kind of, look inside and figure out, kind of how to right the ship, I think.
It really is crazy, and I think you hit the nail on the head. The biggest issue with this is for us as fans, it might not be a waste of a LeBron season. I mean, it's been incredibly fun watching him play. For the Lakers, though, listen, we don't know what the end of LeBron's career is going to look like. We don't know if he's going to be playing at this level right up until the very end. We don't know if there's going to be some kind of massive drop off at 1 second, which sounds crazy to say, but the guy's been around for a really, really, really long time. I believe next season is going to be his 20th season. They have not maximized his time in Los Angeles. That first season, obviously he gets hurt, but that team didn't look like a contender, certainly. They're able to make it work in the bubble, but they've just not been able to maximize LeBron James's time. And it's baffling, it's frustrating, and it's really strange. It just feels like the Lakers have really dropped the ball. They're the Lakers. They're always going to have a chance to reload. Russell Westbrook does turn into an expiring contract next season, even though it's a little dehumanizing the way people use that term sometimes. But yeah, man, it's crazy to think. I mean, I think we talked about this on the pod a little bit earlier, but he's averaging the most points per game since his first Cleveland stint. It just is crazy to me that they've not been able to. It seems like there's a pretty clear formula for success with LeBron James, and it's let's just surround him with 3-and-D guys, guys who don't need the ball in their hands, can space the floor for him, let his decision making take over games. And you just watch Russ, and I hate to put it all on Russ too, but it is. I genuinely have no idea what they were thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was probably also a matter of like who's available, right? And it's always a knee jerk reaction to, last season. But yeah, I mean, personally, it's going to be too easy to take this tack where it's like, oh, we're just going to, pile on Westbrook forever because, he in OKC, he had the same problem, and Houston, he had the same problem. He doesn't know how to play with other people. It's true. Like at this point, like we've seen it happen enough. But I don't want to just like bash him because it's too easy. But like, I don't know exactly how they landed on that. How much influence, LeBron and Davis had on that. We don't know. It's obviously easy for them to hide behind that, whatever. But like, we can't just put it all on Frank Vogel right now. There was an existential issue with the team. I think a lot of people saw it coming into the season. It's just whenever you're going to build, tear it down and build around max guys, there's just really narrow margins. And like, even with LeBron, he has evolved in a way where he's still, doing the things he does, but it's not quite the same where, like you said, with, you get 3-and-D guys, it's still not the same because LeBron is not quite the same in terms of just being able to go get a bucket, right? I mean, he's shot the ball really well this year. He's doing it differently. But it's not like the old days where he's always just going to be able to get to the rim and kind of do what he wants. So, knowing that, the quality of guys they need to have around him is probably a little bit higher. And I just don't know what they do. So I'm not ruling out them getting hot because it might happen.
Right.
But
who knows when AD gets
yeah.
back and maybe they commit to playing small. And it is also a shame about Russ. Mike knows this, and I talk about this on the podcast. A lot of times I'll go back and watch old NBA games on YouTube and whatnot. And the last, 5 or 6 years of Russell Westbrook's career are going to overshadow how exciting and how great of a player he was the first 5 or 6 years of his career and all the things he could do. It's really a shame. But, yeah, we're going to have to see what happens with the Lakers. We're still a couple weeks out from the trade deadline. I'm sure they're going to be at least trying to make a move. I don't even know what's out there for them, but I'm sure we'll be following that closely. But, Woo, I really wanted to talk to you about a bunch of draft stuff today. For those of you who don't know, Jeremy Woo does our mock drafts over at SI. He is constantly watching college basketball, high school basketball. He knows about every player before they blow up. Like he'll mention some guy's name and 3 years later, they're an NBA All-Star. It's pretty incredible. So I want to get to a lot of draft stuff in a second. But first, I actually want to start with rookies from this year, specifically Evan Mobley, because I think Mobley's become kind of the runaway Rookie of the Year favorite. It's going to be a shock if he doesn't win this award. And obviously he's been so great defensively for the Cavs. And I just want to ask you, did people expect him to be this good defensively coming out of college? Like, what was kind of the book on him? And is there a world in which you think he should have gone number one in this most recent draft?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting, always in hindsight, and it hasn't even been a year, right? But
Of
like
course.
the way the way people were talking about him before the draft, and I would say in most cases, is just not the way that he's being talked about now. And people are gonna probably pretend like it was obvious, but I don't think it was to everyone. Now, I guess in the context of our coverage and how I looked at it, I got to see him play a lot over the years. I saw him play a lot in the NCAA tournament. I was there, and I was pretty in on him. Like he was two for me on our rankings the entire year. I think I wrote that it was more of like a 1B, 1A situation, which is kind of a hedge, I admit, but like I really did, like Evan, I did not have the guts to put him one ahead of Kid Cunningham, who I think everybody felt pretty good about, and a player who also I had seen a lot of over the years. If I had to redraft it, I would probably take Mobley one, just off what we've seen this year. And I don't think that's crazy. I have no problem, changing my opinion. And I think a lot of people that run the NBA probably feel the same way. But it is interesting just because, in the run up to the draft, people were all over the board on him. People were not necessarily treating him. This is also, internally around the league.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't necessarily treated like the obvious two. He had some fans for sure. But I think just the overall readiness, I don't think necessarily people expected, but I think it just comes from obviously his length and the way that he can move and kind of eat up space, and that's something that translates. Like I never thought it would be a problem him playing with Jared Allen because Evan is pretty skilled, and clearly that's worked. But also, we have to factor in Cleveland still got lucky here, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
Houston had
Yeah.
a chance to take him and pass. It was made easy for Cleveland, and it just shows how much of the draft sometimes is luck, right? I mean, if Cleveland had gotten the number one pick, they probably would not have taken him.
No, that's a great point. That's a
Right?
really good
And
point.
I
Yeah.
do think he was really in the mix for Detroit at one. Like I know there was a lot of internal debate about what they were going to do. Between Cade and another player. I think it was Evan. I don't know for sure. I was never able to exactly figure out what happened, but I know that there was debate, and I think that it was not like he was some mystery either.
Interesting. It is interesting to me that you say you didn't have an issue, or you never thought it would be an issue him playing alongside Jared Allen. Because I remember on draft night, I was like, I didn't watch Evan Mobley at USC. I kind of catch up on the draft in the weeks leading up to it, reading your coverage, reading profiles, watching YouTube highlight mixes, etc. I remember being like, the Cavs are drafting another center. They're what's going on there? Why do they have so many big men? They traded for Jared Allen. They're probably going to give him a big contract. What was there a position? I mean, right now I do think that we're entering kind of a stage in the NBA where it really doesn't matter what position you play, or even kind of your height, weight, etc. Just what are your skills? But was that maybe an issue with Mobley? Like, where did people kind of project him to play? Because right now he's like almost in between a 4 and a 5. He's kind of I don't know. It's hard to put him in a box, certainly.
Yeah, I mean he's a big. I think it was probably just a referendum, not so much defensively because I think everybody, I don't know, everybody doesn't mean anything, but I think for the
Yeah.
most part, there was some agreement that, defensively, we all kind of knew what he was going to bring to the table, in terms of, being able to move his feet, guard the perimeter, alter a ton of shots. Obviously he's not like a big, hefty, strong guy, but it matters less because no one really posts that much in the NBA, and he's just so long. And his instincts have always been so good. I think it was more a matter of like, if you thought he could play with Allen, it was probably more a referendum on like what you thought his offensive skill set was. But for me, seeing a guy who could really pass like him, who had potential to step out and shoot, which I think he eventually, will be pretty consistent at, and just sort of do a lot of different things. I never thought it was going to be that big of a deal. Now, these things always work or don't, and Jared Allen is, really, really good at what he does too, which is part of why it works, right? Like if it was a lesser 7-footer, it might not be great. But I think part of the appeal with Evan was always that, defensively he would give you some flexibility, and he would, he can also step out and play in the perimeter. So, To me, that was a big part of why he was number two. And I remember watching, like, I went back and during the pre-draft cycle, I watched like some rookie year Tim Duncan clips, and I
Mm-hmm.
was like, that's kind of familiar. Like, not to compare him to
Interesting.
Tim Duncan,
Right.
and
I mean,
also I don't
people
want
are
to sound
already
like
throwing out Kevin Garnett and
no. Like, I don't want to sound like, oh, I thought he was Tim Duncan. Like, I'm not saying that, but
right.
I think there were some similarities in terms of just movement and like broad skill sets. So, having said that, now why did I not rank him one? I mean, probably should have, but
Yeah.
regardless,
Let's not pretend that like Cade Cunningham's been awful or a bust or something like that. He's obviously a very good player, and I mean, this is going to play out over years, right? I mean, John
it always
Morant
does.
and Zion, you know what I mean? Like after the rookie year, everyone would have taken Zion Williamson, and now maybe it's a little different. So it's going to play out.
No, and look, and I guess while we're here, I mean, the thing with Cade is always part of why he's so special is he makes guys better, but like it still matters like the level of supporting talent that he has.
Of course.
Like I never expected Cade to come in and like lead the Pistons to like a playoff revival. Now I didn't think Evan was going to do that in Cleveland either. Right, but like I didn't think Cade. I'm not too. I mean,
Cleveland also has more talent, more veterans.
And then they also, having Allen and Garland both kind of turn the corner at the same time is probably a bigger. Having Evan really helps in terms of their scheme, but like it wouldn't happen without all of those guys. So we can't just treat it like Evan is leading the revival because it's all those guys together, and it's a kind of a credit to Cleveland for being patient. And obviously, like Kobe Altman was in the hot seat for a year, and again, there was some luck involved, getting Evan, but he's stabilized. So it just shows how weird the NBA can be in terms of things like that. Strokes of fate.
Kobe Altman's had. You want to talk about crazy GM careers? Going from succeeding David Griffin in Cleveland, having that last LeBron year, swinging trades, having to deal with the LeBron situation, to they re-sign Love after, and they have all the veterans. He has to let go of Ty Lue, and now he's built this team back up into getting an extension. Kind of a real crazy roller coaster for Kobe Altman. I want to jump to, you had a mock draft come out last week, your mock draft 2.0. So we're still pretty early in this process here. We're going to get to kind of your top three picks because it's funny. There's two guys here that I just assumed were going to be 1 and 2, but they're not. I want to know, though, these days, for those of you who don't know, like Jeremy is watching high school games. He's at every high school tournament, big tournament, college tournament, etc. You were watching these guys from a very young age, often from when they're 16, to when they make it to the NBA. What are you looking for in these prospects? Like, what kinds of things are you looking for to see if they are transferable to the NBA game? Because let me tell you a quick story, all right? Someone who I was convinced was going to have an incredible NBA career. Do you remember Thomas Robinson on Kansas? He came out the same year as Anthony Davis. My worst all-time take was I was like, I don't think this Anthony Davis guy is that much better than Thomas Robinson. Like, didn't Kansas beat Kentucky in the final that year too, or they were in the game?
No, Kentucky won.
Kentucky won, but
yeah,
I was a big Thomas Robinson fan. Obviously, that didn't pan out. Maybe he was ahead of his time. I bet he would have been a 6, small ball 5 now. But I just was like, I didn't know what I was looking at, and obviously everyone was hyped about Anthony Davis. So, what are you looking for, especially as the game changes, to see what these guys can take and bring to the NBA?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, well, in the case of this draft, it's been a little bit different just because, COVID kind of impacted, travel situations and then, the way things kind of picked back up after the pause. Like, I didn't have as much, with this current class of freshmen, I didn't have as much exposure to them necessarily at a younger age. So, this has been, in the last few months have been really a lot of work for me, just making sure that I'm familiar with enough of them. But I would say over the course of the process, and it is like a cycle. I think part of the problem sometimes with how we talk about young players, especially, is just that, we're too quick to post a cool block, oh, this guy's amazing. Yeah, but also this is something that doesn't happen overnight, right? And it's just we have to be patient because I say this a lot. It's, NBA teams, will start watching guys when they're 15 or 16, but they don't have to pick them for 4 years. So it's no one really has to come to a conclusion until it's time to actually make the pick, right? This is a process that we don't have to treat it's not really about being right first. I think there's, always you always want to be like, oh, I was right. But like, I've learned like the best thing you can do is kind of eliminate that as much as you can and try to take the ego out of it. So like, that's what I try to
Mm.
do. And so when I'm going to see these guys, it's more like, I'm taking notes, and if I'm seeing someone play in high school or college or whatever, but it's just kind of like giving myself sort of like checkpoints for like, this is what this is right now, and this is what it could be. And then it's like, you see them a year later, well, how does this line up with what I expected? And a lot of it is honestly just like, it sounds dumb, but I say this like half jokingly a lot, but like a lot of it's just like the vibe. Like, what is the vibe watching this guy when he's 16? Because I think, when you're an upperclassman in high school, 16, 17, 18, like when you sort of make that progress, and guys kind of are who they are identity wise by then, like skills change and you can teach them stuff, but like in terms of how guys tend to view themselves, that doesn't change. So when we're talking about the modern NBA, it's like, thinking about what types of roles are successful, versatility is a huge thing. Obviously like size and skill and basketball IQ are all really huge. I think for me, aesthetically, I just don't love guys who are just like hunting buckets like at a young age, unless you're, really tall and have the sort of like skills for that to translate up, right? Like undersized guys who hunt shots, those guys are kind of become a dime a dozen because everyone always needs scorers. Guys always evolve to do that, but most of them aren't good enough for the NBA because the NBA, teams have the best scorers and the best scorers are going to do that job for a long ass time. So, right. So it's, I'm always trying to look for the secondary traits a lot as well. So
it's funny, literally, as you said, people love to just look at a highlight and then make a determination. Our producer Shelby, aka Blazer Superfan, aka the host of the Rip City Royston Report, sent us a text of a Thomas Robinson highlight from 7 years ago. And the title of the video is Thomas Robinson : Block of the Year. I should have remembered Shelby would have some love for Blazers legend Thomas Robinson. So, Wu, I'm going to read out the top 3 picks from your mock draft, and I want you to tell me just give me the kind of the base storylines of these guys. What to expect, if you expect any movement, etc. But right now you have Jabari Smith, forward out of Auburn, going number 1. I also think it's interesting you have the top 3 guys in this draft, all really big, forward, center, big types. So you have Jabari Smith 1, Paolo Banchero 2, he's the Duke forward, Chet Holmgren 3. I'll go ahead and read the top 5. Johnny Davis from Wisconsin at number 4, Jaden Ivey from Purdue at number 5. Now, I've obviously heard of Banchero and Chet Holmgren. I feel like Holmgren's one of those guys that you've been hearing about for years. Jabari Smith, not on my radar, certainly. Can you compare and contrast these guys a little bit right now? Like, what are you using to separate them? And what's kind of stood out to you about the top guys in this upcoming class?
Yeah, for sure. So I've seen them all play live. And by the end of the year, I'll have seen them all play live like 2 or 3 times, all those 5 guys. So I feel pretty good now about like my general feel for the top of the draft. And like, the interesting thing to me has been, I guess we can start with Jabari Smith, who, I feel pretty good about is going to be the number 1 pick. I do really think that he should be. I don't think like the general discussion right now is like he's 1 for sure, but like I kind of feel that way. Not like saying it's for sure going to happen, but I just feel like the vibe that I've gotten, particularly from just talking to people around the NBA who I think are really good talent evaluators, and particularly I think people who are the higher level, like more experienced execs, all seem to feel pretty strongly about Jabari. And it's interesting, coming into the year, he was not billed as a potential number 1 pick. And I think, again, part of this was, we lost time due to COVID. So there was no McDonald's All-American game, no Jordan Brand Classic, like these events that are used as like checkpoints for like, what is the talent level of this draft class? Those didn't happen. So like we were all kind of playing catch up, but a lot of people went to see Auburn practice in the fall. And I remember getting texts from, 3 to 4 different people who were at those practices. Like, yeah, this guy's legit. But even then it was like, oh, we think Jabari could be, I'd be stunned if he falls out of the top 10. He's definitely going to go top 5, like things like that. Like that's kind of what type of player he was. So we knew he was really interesting coming into the year. But then, I went and saw him in Atlanta in December. They played in Nebraska, and it's just like you get there and you see, how big he is, just how like picturesque his shot is, and it's just like, if you have to have 1 elite skill, that's the skill, and if you're 6'10", it's something else. And he plays defense, and he plays really hard. He doesn't take plays off, so it's like you see the personal aspect of it, like the human aspect of it with him seems to be pretty strong, and you see that there's a really good base skills to layer things on, and you see like how devastating really tall shooters like that can be in the NBA. And it's again, I think it's a stretch to say, I've avoided making the Kevin Durant comparison because like it's just dumb to do that. But just in
Right.
terms of his ability to just like shoot over people, like Jabari has some of that. And you can say, oh, he can't really dribble, but yeah, he's 18. Like Jabari's a whole year younger than Chet Holmgren, which really matters a lot just in terms of player development at this age. So I think he really isn't going to need more than 1, 2, 3 dribbles ever anyway. Like he doesn't need to take you off the dribble. He's just going to be able to shoot over you. So,
Mhm.
and he's that good of a shooter. Like I'm confident in that. With him, I think behind the scenes, the narrative is. I don't want to say narrative. Behind the scenes, though, it really does seem like he's the favorite to go one right now.
Interesting.
Um,
Okay.
okay, and so that's I've had him there since December for us, and then Bankero, I think is probably the other player who has at least some level of I'd take this guy one more so than Chet, and so coming into there he was one for me. That was sort of before I had sort of realized what was up with Smith. Bankero is a really good prospect. I mean, he's super skilled with the ball for a guy that size. He can really, create separation, create mismatches. He's been really good for Duke. I think he's a good passer. I think the playmaking is starting to kind of manifest with him too.
Mm-hmm.
So he's a player who I've kind of compared him to like Julius Randle, like the good Julius Randle, which I don't know if we'll ever see that Julius Randle
Not
again. But like,
2022 Julius Randle.
right? But
Not
like
getting
Julius
booted home,
Randle, or
Julius
like
Randle. Yeah.
yeah, just in the sense that like he's a big guy who can kind of play through. He's a good enough passer. He's physical. But I think with him, I think the key issue, and I've written this too, it's just more of an existential one where it's like, I think he's a true power forward. Like defensively, he may improve, but he's not going to be like a rim protector. So I don't know how much he's going to be able to like play center if you go small. And with guys like that who are kind of like more narrow defensive usage role wise, it's just tough because we see those guys kind of plateau where it's like, okay, the defense is just not commensurate with the offensive impact in terms of what you're giving up, and it's happened to a lot of guys sort of in that mold. You can look at Blake Griffin or older Carmelo when he sort of played more power forward, right? And again, this is great company for him to be in that we're even talking about this, and I think he's going to have a really good career. But I'd rather have the guy who is the better shooter and is always going to be the better shooter with Jabari, and is also better defensively with Jabari, right? Just in terms of like upside and like winning construct. So, for me, Parlo's two, but I feel pretty good about him too. Like
Can I ask you,
he'll be good. Yeah.
for Holmgren at 3, does it ever surprise you still, like how high centers go in the draft? I remember when DeAndre Ayton went number 1, and I've grown to love DeAndre Ayton. I think he's obviously been a really impactful player. Why do teams still take centers so high in the draft? It's not that I think Holmgren won't be a good player. I mean, he's a 7-footer, but it just is it never funny to you? I mean, with the way the league's headed, that like 7-footers like Holmgren are still so seductive for teams.
No, because I think it's has to be more of a case by case deal. Like, I mean, there are some centers, and I think a good counter argument would be, James Wiseman. That was probably not the right pick at 2 for Golden State, and people, it wasn't like that argument wasn't out there. There were a lot of people who, publicly and otherwise, like didn't feel great about Wiseman at number 2. And I think that, obviously he's been hurt. We haven't really had a chance to see it. So it's kind of not fair to like make too much of an example of him, but just like, those guys who are sort of traditional, like truly traditional bigs who do not have the real legitimate perimeter versatility or whatever, are not like super, super special. I think it's worth asking. Like Jalen Duren from Memphis is someone who I'm a little bit lower on this year, kind of for those reasons, right? It's kind of like he doesn't really do anything that's like super modern to me. But with Holmgren, it's a little bit of a different discussion just because he is very skilled and he is very good defensively in the sense that he can move his feet, he can block shots, he's long. I have not been as high on him ever as a lot of other people have. Just like, I've seen Gonzaga play twice, and I think he's good. I'm not convinced he's like a guy who's really gonna like, you know, change the arc of your franchise, right? And again, now in this draft, that's kind of relative because it's not a super strong lottery class.
Right.
So if you need a center, I think he's an interesting play. After those other guys are off the board, depending on which team you are. But I don't think it's like a foregone conclusion that he goes there. Like I think Ivy or Davis, one of those guards, could maybe get picked ahead of him, depending on the team. So, but I do think that with Chad, I think you just look at him; he's so skinny, and he's so like kind of gangly and kind of like awkward in some ways. And I think that's your initial response is like, well, what is this? But the more you watch him, there is really some fundamental strength to his game that I think are will translate in some way. So look, if he can hit threes and protect the rim and kind of like do all that stuff, it's okay. And whatever else he adds is fine. But is he the same caliber of prospect as Ed Mobley? No. Like that comparison has been made. I don't like it at all.
I see. All right. He's also got like a name from like a Hardy Boys novel or something. Chet Holmgren, a real Franklin W. Dixon ass sounding name. All right. I just have a couple more draft questions for you. This one, it's funny. Johnny Davis from Wisconsin. This is what you wrote. The main concern surrounding Davis at this point are his size. Parentheses. Some teams think he may be a bit shorter than his listed height. End parentheses. How does that happen? What does that mean?
It happens every year. This is just something I think we all do. Where it's like, how tall is he really? Like when you go to the game and a guy looks a little bit smaller.
He's 6'5" on Hinge, but everywhere else he's like 6'3.5" is what you're saying.
Yeah, like look, when I played club baseball in college, and I listed myself as 6'2". I'm 6 feet in shoes, but I was like, no one's gonna read this, so I fudged it a little bit. So these colleges sometimes, not a criticism, but always, there's maybe an inch that gets fudged. The NBA has been better about having real heights now, so we'll find out. But
that's why I didn't. That's why I didn't recognize you that one time. I was like, that guy's not 6'2". That can't be Jeremy Woo.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's
right. And then lastly, Woo. So another one of your talents, I got to say, is every year it feels like you identify a sleeper. I remember you were big fan of Tyrese Halliburton when you ended up going to the Kings. He's obviously been one of the better rookies from that class. You were telling us just the other day, we joked about Max Strus on this podcast, but he was someone who you liked his game a lot when he was coming out of college. Is there anyone further down your board? I mean, you don't have to predict that they're going to be a great player, but just someone who is maybe fringe lottery, not in the lottery, that you just like their game. You're just excited about them. You like watching them play. Who is that guy, or who are those people that you kind of like that are maybe really under the radar right now?
Yeah, so I think there are a few guys like that for me right now who I do think like there's an outside chance they could kind of like sneak closer to the lottery. Maybe where I have them is more aggressive relative to like how they're viewed, but we'll kind of see how that evolves. But like I think Blake Wesley from Notre Dame is a freshman who I think has been really good to this point. Who didn't really know anything about coming into the season. He was a local guy who stayed at Notre Dame, and I don't know if he'll actually. It seems like he can turn pro if he wants. He's having that type of year. I could see him, maybe going back and being really good, but like, his physical tools, his ability to get to the basket. I mean, it's good building blocks, and this is the type of draft where people are going to kind of be just like throwing darts, like after the first 7 or 8 picks, right? So I think he's an interesting one. I like EJ Liddell from Ohio State. Who's kind of like maybe a slightly undersized power forward, but kind of like sort of like the PJ Washington idea. He's a little bit smaller than PJ, but also has a little bit more versatility, and I think shoots it better. I think he's a guy who will probably kind of climb up into maybe that top 20 range. And then a couple other guys who are like later in the draft who I like. I really like Jaime Jacquez from UCLA. As maybe like a late first, early second type guy. He's really tough. I think he. He's a little bit underrated now. Maybe he was a little overrated coming out of the tournament last year. Now he's a little bit underrated. And then I like Keon Ellis from Alabama, who I've seen. He's kind of skinny, but just does a lot of things that I like for a role player. And then I guess lastly, shout out Pete Nance from Northwestern, who is actually a pretty good prospect, man. I've seen him play a couple times, and I think there's a pretty real chance he gets drafted. So.
I don't want to turn this into a Northwestern basketball pod.
No, that was not what I was trying to do.
I have not watched a Northwestern basketball game since they made the tournament like 6 years ago now. But Chris Collins Let's get it together, bro. One tournament, that's not good enough. It's not good enough. You've really been dining out on that one tournament appearance for many years now. Like, you didn't get the Duke job. Like this is it, I guess. So like, get it together, man. All right, Woo. I want to move to some emails. Thank you for all that draft info. Everyone, keep an eye on those names. Woo knows the sleepers. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens at the top of the draft. Just because it is interesting how the game is kind of shifting towards these big wings who can do a lot, and you're seeing it play out the way you've seen it play out now with Mobley and some of these guys at the top of the draft. It's interesting to kind of chart the progress of the game in terms of who gets picked where. But let's get to some emails, Woo. Let you have some fun here. This one's from Hillary from the infinite suburbs of Los Angeles. Thank you for your email, Hillary. She says, "Hello, Open Floor. I would really appreciate it if you could explain to me why there have been so few players fouling out in recent years. Was there a rule change I didn't understand the implication of? I do recognize that the game has been more accommodating of offense in the past decade or so, but are there other underlying reasons? I can recall in the 80s and 90s players somewhat, stressed somewhat, routinely fouling out in comparison to now. Thank you." First of all, fascinating question. I should have probably looked up the data. Of course, I did not. Woo, do you have a working theory on why it would appear players are fouling out less now, in Hillary's estimation?
I mean, no. I don't want to like say something sweeping that I don't really haven't thought about, but I do think like there definitely is. You know, we've talked about, or people have talked about it plenty. You know, this year officiating wise, and they are kind of letting them play more. They're trying to not let guys bait the refs into those foul calls like James Harden, Trae Young, guys who often will do that. I think I do, from what I understand. I mean, there is more of an internal push to like let the play become a little bit more physical again. What that means, we won't really know, but like I do think there is some movement back towards at least somewhat like making it more of a balanced defense offense game again. So
Well, I will make the sweeping conclusions you're not willing to make, but I think the game has just gone way more skill based. I mean, think about some of the big men that they used to throw out there in the 80s and 90s who were just hammering people. I mean, what would Bill Laimbeer do if he played? What would Jamal McGlure do if he played? Jamal McGlure was an all-star.
right.
I just think the game has gotten less physical, not in the way that the 80s and 90s players try to glorify, but it's become more about skill. It's become more about, can you score, can you dribble, can you cut, can you move, etc. It's not about intimidating players in the lane and this and that. And I think that's been a good move by the NBA. It's made the game more exciting. As you mentioned, they are trying to still find that balance between offense and defense. But quite frankly, there were a lot of goons who played in the 80s and 90s, okay? And you don't get a lot of goons anymore. You don't get a lot of like Ruben Pattersons. I mean, you just don't get a lot of those guys anymore. The Reggie Evanses.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There's just not a lot of place in the league for people who
Yeah.
don't have a skill other than intimidation.
Yeah, well, that role's evaporated because I mean, a lot of teams would carry like extra 7-footers to like foul shack in the playoffs. Like it literally, that was like what would happen. Like there was a role that existed. It's like, hey, you're the guy who's going to come in and do this and then go sit back down. And now you can't really waste roster spots. I think teams are a little bit more creative about roster construction as well. But also, like I would say to your point, sort of about skill, like today's stars are so good that like there's no point in like having Ruben Patterson. Hey, we're gonna just have you, go guard this guy. It's like, yeah, it's nice, but we probably need someone who. I'd rather have someone who can like also score and like do it that way rather than like try to stop players who the best players in the league are all pretty hard to guard no matter what, no matter who it is. So it's the narrow specialist role has evaporated for sure.
Yeah, there are very few enforcers left, and I think, honestly, it's been better for the aesthetic of the game. This next email, this truly is a global show, comes all the way over from Spain. Manuel, thank you so much for this email. He says, the past 2 years, I've enjoyed a lot of time inside my home for reasons out of my control. Because I was struggling with cancer, now luckily cured. Manuel, that's outstanding news. He said, I had to stay isolated most of the time during the still ongoing pandemic. Anyway, I used this time to recuperate lost hobbies, and between them, gaming. I purchased a PS4 and the last NBA 2K. I enjoyed it as the closest thing I could do to basketball. In the game, there's a mode where you collect player cards and you play against different formations against other players. One of them is called Triple Threat, and is a 3-on-3 version of the game. I soon realized most of the players I played with, the intuitive formation of a point guard, forward, and center seemed to be more logical to play with than two forwards who can defend the perimeter and make threes, and a versatile center who can defend the paint. Sorry for the long introduction, but my question is this. How would you construct your ideal 3-player team, and what current players or past, let's probably keep to current. We've had some issues bringing up past players on this podcast, specifically the Kevin Garnett one-on-one debacle. How would you construct your ideal 3-player, 3-on-3 team? And he said, keep up the great contact. It really helped me through these not great times. Manuel, thank you so much, man. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for emailing. This is a great question. I love this. Woo, tell me your 3-on-3 team and why.
Yeah, I mean, like, to the point of roster construction, I mean, I think there was a quick, referendum on what we just talked about in terms of size and skill. It's kind of been the thread of this whole podcast, right? From, Evan Mobley to, whatever, those are the guys you want. I mean, my ideal 3-on-3 team, and I would just take Kevin Durant and then like whoever else is on the team. I don't care because I would just let him shoot every time. But no, I mean, I think that's to the point, size and skill. Give me KD and give me, guys who can really pass. I'm not like super picky about it. Like who would you take?
So I decided I'm going to restrict myself to only one max player, because you could just be like, oh, I'll take Kevin Durant, LeBron, and Giannis, and obviously you're winning. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. Like, I don't know how to.
Right, yeah. Right. So if you kind of give yourself some parameters, I think it becomes more fun.
Okay.
So I decided I'm going with Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry, and PJ Tucker. I'm going all culture. I mean this genuinely, though. I think if there was like a 2-on-2 NBA Jam style tournament, I think Kyle Lowry and PJ Tucker would go way further than people expect. Those guys are just nuts. I in those situations, I just want kind of like the most. This is sad because now I'm doing the argument that Pina did for the KG, but I just want the most insane competitors. And I have such a deep love and respect in my heart for PJ Tucker, and I have his entire career all the way back to when he was in Phoenix and just diving into the stands for loose balls and stuff. But yeah, I think you want like competitors, guys who are going to really, really get after it. Like 3-on-3 is not the NBA. Like PJ Tucker's got some skills. You know what I mean? Like I think he's gonna rough some people around. He's gonna get away with some fouls, and he's gonna hit a bunch of floaters.
I don't know.
No?
I mean, PJ Tucker is PJ Tucker, but PJ Tucker of the now is not PJ Tucker of the past. So I don't know. I don't know if I would prefer him, but I'll just take Jason Tatum and RJ Barrett. So Katie, Jason Tatum, and RJ Barrett.
Can I say what you called Jason Tatum in our group chat, or is that do I have to keep that too?
I can't remember what you're.
I believe you said the Celtics with Jason Tatum are going to be like the Hawks with Joe Johnson, which was I think Peta probably made a dark.
He's going to be horrified. He's going to be horrified at this.
Yeah, he can't believe that made it. He's definitely going to be. I think he probably. No, but the
best part was after I called Jason Tatum evolutionary Joe Johnson. Joe Johnson got signed by Boston 2 days later.
Yes, they signed Joe Johnson. That's right.
That was by far the best part.
That was definitely the best part of the bit.
Yeah. I like Joe Johnson. I was once at when I lived in. Quick story: when I lived in Brooklyn, when we had just moved to New York after college, I would go to a lot of Nets games for like $12 and like sit in the rafters. And I went to a Nets Nuggets game. I don't remember what year it was. It was like in between 2015 and 2016, and it was like Jokic was either a rookie or in his second year, but it ended with Joe Johnson banking in a 3-point game winner. Like literally just like throwing it up, and you can find it on YouTube. Joe Johnson banks in game winner, but it was awesome. So shout out.
Joe Johnson is great. Miami Heat legend. I'm so glad that he got back to the NBA this year. Got hit another shot. We're going to get out of here with one last email today. This is from Drew in Chicago, which how about that? Not too far from where we went to college and where you currently live.
Who would have thought?
Drew, there we go. Drew says, "Good afternoon, Michael, Rohan, and Chris." Sorry, Drew, we got
I'll
Jeremy
accept
today. Yeah. He says forwards have hogged the Finals MVP award for the past 11 seasons. My question for you, gentlemen, is: outside of the ones who've already won the award recently, James, Antetokounmpo, Durant, and Kawhi, who do you think will be the next forward to earn Finals MVP honors? Sincerely, Drew from Chicago. So I guess if you had to project out forward, I mean, who's going to be the guy, like the next kind of wave here? No LeBron, no Giannis, no KD, no Kawhi. Who's kind of the next wing you see maybe picking up a Finals MVP? We know Pina's answer is Tatum.
That's tough. I mean, are we going to call Devin Booker a guard or a forward?
I think he's a guard for the purposes of this one. I think he's a guard.
I think so too. Like if I was going to say like wing guard, I guess he'd be a pretty good guess. I don't know. That's really difficult. I mean, I'm just trying to think about like who is actually. I mean, is Luka a forward or a guard?
I think Luka is probably the best.
If we can,
I mean, he plays the same position as LeBron, whatever you call it.
That's what I was just going to say. He plays the LeBron position now, so I would say Luka, just because in terms of where he is and where the team is and what you can actually see realistically happening, he's the best one to guess. I think we can say that. I think we can call him a forward, even though he's kind of a guard.
What about Rudy Gobert?
He's a center.
I'm kidding. There's a lot of Rudy Gobert jokes on this podcast.
I have to admit, I don't listen to this podcast as much as you would like me to. So.
Yeah, I understand. I think Luka's really the pick here. I was gonna maybe make a case for Jimmy Butler, but I've already done enough Heat homerism today. But it is interesting. I mean, if you go down kind of the list of kind of the best teams in the league right now, if you're looking for that next wing guy, I mean, I think it's more likely. This is why I love Drew's question so much. I think you're more likely to get a guard. I mean, or a center. I mean, Embiid, he's obviously not a forward. I think Chris Paul has a great chance. I mean, obviously, if the Warriors win, it's almost definitely you'd think it would be Steph this time. So it is interesting because I am curious where this game is going to head after kind of LeBron and KD. I think obviously Giannis is going to be great for such a long time, but there isn't that kind of surefire, I think, wing prospect in the league right now. Again, unless you're putting Luka in that category, and I think he's in it, but I don't know who the successor to that type of player is. You know what I mean? I mean, to be honest, I do think somebody like Tatum is probably the best bet just because he fits that mold, body-wise and scoring-wise, etc. But I don't know who kind of fits that mold of being that new kind of perimeter scorer type.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of where the game is going, though, right? I mean, we talked about it in the context of the draft. I mean, the tall, super skilled guys are now the guys you really want. It's like an evolving prototype. I mean, I do think Luka's interesting just because he's such an outlier. Being with his background, who he is. I mean, he's one of the best, already on track to be one of the best players ever. So it's kind of like you could put him in that bucket, but he also, like you said, he kind of plays that same big LeBron like lead guard / forward role. I don't know. I wouldn't say Jason Tatum, but I think we'll see, because it's like at the end of the day, and I think what his question kind of reflects is like in the playoffs, often, it's more of a half court game, and you need the guys who are going to be able to get the good shots late in the clock, and traditionally those are the guys who are the bigger skilled guys. So again, it all kind of is, there's a through line here, right? I mean, LeBron and Giannis is different, and Durant is different, and Kawhi is different, but those are all guys who, in a pinch, were able to get their own shot. I think Giannis is the outlier here because he's not as skilled as those guys, not as much of a shooter, but he's just so physically dominant that it's different. But also, like, there's not going to be another Giannis. So, it is what it is.
It is an interesting question, and it is funny to think about it through the context of the draft, because the game is changing. We're seeing it happen before our eyes. Pretty soon, there's going to be someone with like the size of LeBron who can shoot like Steph Curry, and it's just they're going to destroy. They're going to absolutely. I genuinely, I was thinking about this last night. I think that player is going to come along in like the next 15 to 20 years, and we're not going to be able to know what to do with them because that's just the way the game is headed. Everyone that big shoots and dribbles now. It's going to be really interesting to watch. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining the Open Floor Pod. This was a big week for the podcast. We had 3 episodes, Spike Lee, Jeremy Woo on. It's been big. Thank you so much to all of our listeners. Please keep those emails coming. openfloormail@gmail.com. Remember that Jeremy Woo is 6 feet 2 inches tall. And we'll catch you guys next week. Until then, everyone stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you for listening to Open Floor.